Welcome to episode 3 of Not a Prep. So if you do just want to go straight to this time and see where I am progress wise, go for it. If you do just want to know a little bit more about my training and how I distribute my training across the week and what it looks like, here it is, I guess. Like most things, same as my nutrition, I like to keep things relatively basic and straightforward. I think the basics done consistently is going to be a lot more powerful than just doing random kind of more complicated stuff that may sound all clever and all of that, but in reality most things are principle and fundamentally driven, and it's the same with training and nutrition. In order to lose weight, I need a caloric deficit. In order to gain muscle, or at least preserve muscle, I need to be progressively overloading, which basically means, in a nutshell, doing more over time. So a beginner can get away with doing barely anything and see results, but over time you build up a bit of resistance, therefore you need to do more in order to gain more. At this stage of my training life or career, I'm not really going to gain muscle at a very fast rate. So any weight lost, I'm very unlikely to gain muscle, especially in a calorie deficit. So any weight loss is going to generally correlate to fat loss, whereas people who may be starting resistance training and eating in a calorie deficit can absolutely gain muscle and lose fat at the same time and get what we call a body recomposition effect, which is brilliant. That's what we kind of really want, but obviously that can play tricks on the scales, and if people are very scale driven, it can often upset them a little bit, so bear that in mind. The way I distribute my volume or my workload across the week is over 6 sessions. Now you can distribute your volume across however many sessions, but a way and a means of progressively overload is potentially increasing your training frequency. Me, when I train, I like to kind of get in and out. So by training 6 sessions per week, those sessions generally around 40 minutes, maybe up to an hour max. I feel if they go on too long, I get a little bit I switch off a little bit towards the end, and I end up just moving weight around. That mind-muscle connection is generally getting less and less towards the end of a session. I do a kind of push-pull legs, rest. So 6 days on the bounce, and then typically rest on a Sunday. I generally, for 3 weeks, keep the same training program and then do a deload. My deload might go to 4 sessions, so I'm on a deload this week, in which I'll just do an upper, lower. So the point of a deload is to kind of bring down fatigue and allow that fitness that you've built over them 3 to 5 to 6 weeks, however long that training block is, allow that to kind of come to fruition, I'm going to say. I hope that makes sense. Yeah, so I'm on a deload, and then what I'll be doing is a new program. I typically run programs for about 8 to 12 weeks, just dependent on my enjoyment of them. So I will do a 3-week deload, and I'll try and build on the previous block. So I'll go like week 1, week 2, week 3 deload, and then I'll try and basically take that block and build upon it. So 1, 2, 3 deload. And because I've been training a while, you build up a general amount of intuition with training, so I kind of know where I'm starting with certain weights and how I want to feel it in what rep range. Typically the rep ranges that I use, at a minimum of around 6 reps, up to it can be maybe 20, 30 in some cases, but usually the majority is done between that 8 and 12 rep range. In terms of total workload, I would say up to around 20 sets per muscle group per week. That's distributed across the 2 sessions, so I'm hitting muscle groups twice per week. So in my push sessions, that's primarily chest, shoulders, triceps, pulls primarily back, and then obviously legs or lower extremities. But yeah, training's obviously a kind of an important variable when it comes to gaining muscle or maintaining muscle, we have to have a certain drive there. From a cardio perspective, I do none in my eyes. My energy expenditure is quite high, so I will generally do a lot of steps and very low impact, low stressing energy expenditure. So as I mentioned previously, possibly, I think I did, anything that's taxing, that requires overload for me to adapt to, that's taking away from the potential of muscle retention and resistance training, which is the most important thing when it comes to gaining and building muscle. So you don't need cardio in order to lose body fat, but you probably want something that is energy expending. So I'm a big fan of people tracking their steps. There's the boy. Anyway, again, so the most important thing when it comes to training is keep it simple. I track my training using an app called Rep Count, so I kind of know what I did the last time, and I can use notes and things like that. I find it handy on my phone, but good old pen and piece of paper, having a logbook. But training should be structured, and sometimes paying too much attention to the numbers distracts from like actually putting effort in. So there's been a lot of years in the past where I just didn't really like log my training, whereas I still had structure. I still knew what I was doing on certain days. I knew I was doing legs, and you know, one or two exercises would be priority in that kind of session, whether it be squats or some sort of heavy pressing motion. So I always kind of like to ask people to ask themselves the question, get people to ask themselves the question, what's the next best thing? Sometimes being overly rigid with tracking your training can kind of take the fun out of it, and the whole point of all of this is so that it's fun, because if it's fun, that means it's sustainable. So even myself, I take breaks away from tracking my training. So this is how I periodize my training. So I might do a few blocks of tracking, but then I might go a little bit bro, a little bit renegade, and be just like, hey, I know how to train. It's kind of like tracking my nutrition. I don't need to track to roughly know what levels of hunger I should feel, what a plate of food looks like, you know. And it's the same with training. I know what training should look like and how it's structured. Anyway, I hope that helps. The little break there was because my son, who's there, came on over and ruined everything. But yeah, here's this week's stuff. I hope you enjoyed. Any questions, just write a comment, fire us a message, and I'll be happy to offer a little bit more clarity on things. Thank you. Hello, and yes, welcome to week three's update. So I'm going to walk you through my sheets. We'll take a very quick look at last week. So if I just scroll up, my average was 86.7, and after another week of tracking, it is down 0.4, so that's a 3.1 average loss. But if you look at my total loss, it was like up to 89, and now it's like the top end of 86s. If you do hear a child, 86.3, bottom end of 83, 6.3. Yes, so as I said last week going in, and you know, I had this really high kind of weigh-in that very quickly kind of dissipated. Although this morning, 87.3, which is frustrating. Again, I mentioned last week, I'm human, so these sorts of things, kind of little curveballs, especially after a bit of a low day yesterday. So who knows what happened there. I did have a couple of high days. The reason for my high days was because hunger was getting a little bit higher than I would have liked, so I just needed something to offset it. Typically, high days are very high in carbs. I use a quick add function there. This here was a Nando's before we went to the pictures, and this was a very carby pasta dish, a large pasta dish. But as you can see, a couple of high days. After the first high day, I actually dropped a bit of weight and hit a new low on the scales. And then after the couple of high days, large salty pasta meal was up again, then up again. Yeah, what we have. So yeah, we went to see that 1917. Honestly, a very, very good movie. I would heavily recommend it. If we go to the daily assessments and we just scroll to that current week, I know that was about 17,000 steps again. Okay, but from a hunger perspective, hunger was quite high, but them high days absolutely curbed that hunger. Appetite's just back to normal now, and I certainly expect that the same will happen this week. I'll get hungry, and I make up the majority of the deficit in the surrounded days. So I might. So what I was considering was my first little diet break, but if I'm honest, those high days just made everything so much better. So I'm just going to kind of crack on with my deficit and may have a maintenance period in a week or two. As far as steps, sleep, everything's really all right. No issues whatsoever. And this is kind of the reality of this part of the process. It is just simply fat loss, and that is the reality of contest prep, although this is not a prep, but it's just continually fat loss. It's starvation to a point that you can see your abs and veins, and there isn't really anything magic. The art comes later, way down the line, when we have to learn to structure high days in to offset hunger, but still, in the grand scheme of things, keep in a caloric deficit. And to a certain degree, there is a little bit of discipline required then. And I've mentioned in the past, in order to be healthy, you don't need to do this shit. You don't need to track your calories. We need to have some good habits and behaviors in place. So I will certainly not track my calories forever. But there will be periods where I might pick up the phone and track things if I need to rein it in, etc., or just get an idea of where I am, or when I'm doing something like this. Solely at this point, this is just for me to kind of give you a little bit of information. But anyway, quite an easy week so far. Feeling quite happy going into week 4. So that's pretty much it. Nothing exciting so far. It's a deload, as you will have heard, so I fully expect a little bit more of a drop. I think I was very hungry last week because my training, as I mentioned, it gets harder and harder and harder. That was kind of the last week of the second block of training. So the next training block, I will be changing my program a little bit, including some movements that I did have in the last one, but incorporating new ones. For example, I'm really loving barbell hip thrusts, so they're going to go up the pecking order as exercise 1, so I can really kind of work on getting it better at them. Anyway, hope that helps. Any questions, as I mentioned, just fire away. Speak soon.